The hazards off feature is something that we've all wanted for a while now, but how does it change every stage? Some stages go from this to this, while other stages go from this to this. Don't worry, my fellow smashers, we're gonna go over what the hazards off feature does to every single stage in the game. And just so I don't have to repeat myself 50 times, let's set some general guidelines. If I say something on the stage can't be destroyed, assume that it no longer has a hurt box. That means that your attacks won't connect and interact with the object, however you'll still be able to collide with it, unless I say otherwise. Also, if a traveling or transforming stage never makes it past the first area, then we can obviously assume that the hazards and things that exist in the other parts of the stage don't matter. Blast zones stay the same, including walk-offs, and you can still go from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen and vice versa on stages like Balloon Fight. And finally, if you can shark through a stage with hazards on, meaning attack or jump through the main platform from below it, then assume you can still do that with hazards off. I think that covers everything. Enough rambling, I'm going to be going through the stages in the order that they appear on the selection screen, so feel free to follow along in your own game. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone, but Battlefield, Big Battlefield, and Final Destination aren't changed at all with hazards off. Peach's Castle normally has a bumper on the top, 2 wedge blocks on the sides that move diagonally up and down, and a bottom platform that's constantly shifting from the left to the right. With hazards off, there's no bumper at the top, the wedge blocks don't move, and the bottom platform doesn't move and is perfectly centered. Congo Jungle usually has 2 elevator-style middle platforms that are constantly cycling, and a barrel at the bottom that you can launch yourself out of. With hazards off, the middle platforms don't move and are stuck at the top, however they're not touching, so there is a gap in between that you can fall through, and there's no barrel at the bottom that you can shoot yourself out of. Usually Hyrule Castle has an occasional tornado, but with hazards off, there's no tornado at all. Super Happy Tree, also known as Yoshi 64, has 1 cloud on the left side and 2 clouds on the right side that vanish if you stand on them for a few seconds. With hazards off, these clouds will never vanish. Occasionally on Dreamland, Wispy Woods will blow wind, but with hazards off, Wispy doesn't blow any wind at all. Saffron City usually has Pokemon popping out of the door occasionally who do attacks or toss items, like in Chansey's case. It also has platforms on the left that move up and down. With hazards off, the Silphco door never opens, so Pokemon never come out, and the platforms on the left are stuck in their highest position. Usually Mushroom Kingdom 64 features POW blocks, lift platforms in the middle that go up and down depending on which one you're standing on, and piranha plants that come out of the warp pipes occasionally. You can also go through the warp pipes. However, with hazards off, the piranha plants never spawn, you can't actually travel through the warp pipes, there are no lift platforms whatsoever in the middle, and no POW blocks will spawn. Princess Peach's Castle has a small platform on each side that rise when you stand on them. Occasionally, little switches will spawn that also spawn exclamation point blocks and extra platforms. And every now and then, a bonsai bill will attack and create a huge explosion. With hazards off, there's no bonsai bill, no switches, and the small platforms on the side don't rise when you stand on them. Rainbow Cruise is a scrolling stage that starts on a flying ship and then takes you through a whole bunch of random platforms. With hazards off, the stage is just the flying ship at the beginning and it never scrolls to any of the other areas. Usually on Congo Falls, the main wooden platform will move as you stand on it. There are logs that sometimes flow through the waterfall to create an extra platform, there are clap traps that'll hurt you, and a launch barrel at the bottom that you can shoot yourself out of. However, with hazards off, there is no clap traps, no launch barrel, no logs that flow through the waterfall, and the main platform stays completely still when you're standing on it. Jungle Japes usually has clap traps that can jump out of the water and kill you if you get a little bit too close, but with hazards off, there are no clap traps at all. However, you can still swim in the water and jump out of it. I forgot to mention this in my guidelines at the start, but if a stage has water, just assume that with hazards off, the water is still there and you can still swim in it and jump in it. Speaking of water, Great Bay normally features a turtle on the right side that'll occasionally sink back into the water. Tingle also appears occasionally, and I believe he carries an item with him. However, with hazards off, Tingle never appears and the turtle never sinks into the water. And the rock on the left side still moves when you stand on it. Despite being such a large stage, Temple actually has no hazards, so it's exactly the same with hazards off. Brinstar has fleshy pillars attaching the side platforms to the stage that can be broken, and the explosive part near the middle can be broken to separate the stage in two. And of course, the acid that rises up from the bottom. With hazards off, the fleshy pillars and the explosive part in the middle don't have hurt boxes whatsoever. You can't attack them, and this is actually one of the rare cases where you also can't collide with them either. And of course, the acid never rises up, so if you fall off the stage, you die. There's no acid whatsoever. Yoshi's Island Melee usually has those blocks that start rotating after you hit them, so you can fall right through them. With hazards off, the blocks don't actually have a hurt box, so you can't actually hit them, which means they don't rotate. Yoshi's story usually has Randall the Cloud constantly cycling at the bottom of the stage, and fly guys that appear occasionally with items. However, with hazards off, the fly guys never appear, and unfortunately, Randall the Cloud isn't there either. On Fountain of Dreams, the left and right platforms randomly move and change heights, sometimes they disappear completely. But with hazards off, the left and right platforms are stuck at their middle height and never move, so it's basically Battlefield. Green Greens features our buddy Wispy Woods blowing wind again, and blocks and bombs that connect the side platforms to the main one. With hazards off, those blocks and bombs don't spawn whatsoever, and Wispy doesn't blow wind. Corneria has R-Wings that appear to carry people off stage and shoot lasers at them, and the Great Fox's cannons at the bottom also shoot lasers. With hazards off, the R-Wings never appear, and you can still go down to the Great Fox's cannons, however they don't have a hurt box so you can attack them all you want and never get shot. Venom features R-Wings and Wolfen ships, however with hazards off, all of them are gone. Unfortunately, the ship still tilts left and right though. Pokemon Stadium has those transformations that I'm sure we're all familiar with, so with hazards off, there are no transformations whatsoever. It's basically Battlefield, but without the top platform. Normally on it has cars that drive by occasionally that do a ton of knockback, and the drugstore sign and the platforms below it will eventually fall temporarily if you land on them too many times. However, with hazards off, the cars never appear, and the drugstore sign and the platforms below it never fall. Mushroom Kingdom 2 has Birdos that shoot eggs, Pidgeots that fly around on their magic carpets, and floating logs that occasionally appear in the water as extra platforms. However, with hazards off, there's no Birdo, no Pidgeots, and no floating logs. Brinstar Depths is a crazy stage that rotates as the big boss behind it, Kraid, smacks the stage. However, with hazards off, Brinstar Depths stays in its initial position. Fortunately, Kraid never appears to smack the stage into rotation. Big Blue features the Falcon Flyer, other racers below, and floating side platforms that appear occasionally. Sometimes the Falcon Flyer will actually leave the screen and you're forced to fight on all the smaller racers below. However, with hazards off, the Falcon Flyer never despawns, the other racers below never spawn, and it's the only platform for the entire match. Those other floating side platforms never appear. Fourside usually has a crane holding a platform on the left side that moves back and forth, and a UFO at the top of the stage. However, with hazards off, the UFO never appears, and the crane platform stays completely still. Delfino Plaza actually has no change with hazards off. It still travels everywhere, it'll still leave you behind, and you can still swim in the water. Mushroomy Kingdom is an exact replica of the World 1-1 stage in the original Mario game. So it has blocks along the way that you can break and grab items from. But with hazards off, the blocks can't be destroyed since there's no hurt box, and therefore you can't spawn items out of them. Figure 8 Circuit has a bunch of Shy Guys driving around, and you can see where they are by the map in the background. However, with hazards off, the carts never drive by, and the map in the background is blank. Occasionally on WarioWare Inc. you'll have a random microgame, and the winners and losers of those microgames will be given buffs and nerfs at random as well. However, with hazards off, there's no microgames, no randomness, and you can enjoy a somewhat decent platform layout without any of the ridiculous hazards. Bridge of Eldin usually has King Bulbin that occasionally appears, drops a bomb, and destroys the bridge momentarily. However, with hazards off, King Bulbin never appears, and the bridge is never destroyed. Norfair has lava that rises from the bottom, lava that comes in from the side, lava that sprays from the background, and a huge lava tidal wave. So, as you can guess, with hazards off, there's no lava whatsoever. It's just you, your opponent, and these 5 platforms. Usually on Frigate Orpheon, there's a right side platform that moves up and down, additional platforms that occasionally appear on the left and right sides, and occasionally the screen will completely do a 180 flip. However, with hazards off, the stage remains in its default first position and never flips over, the lights don't flash, and the side platforms never appear. However, the right side platform still moves up and down. Yoshi's Island features fly guys that occasionally come by with items, the Blargwitch, aka the ghost platform that occasionally appears on the left and right side, and the secondary platform in the middle of the stage will tilt as the seasons change. However, with hazards off, that platform doesn't tilt at all and stays perfectly flat, there are no fly guys that come by with items, and the ghost platform never appears. Halberd is another one of those traveling stages, but once the fighting area finally lands on the ship, the Halberd starts firing lasers at you, firing cannonballs at you, and hitting you with a mechanical arm. With hazards off, the stage still travels and follows the Halberd, however once it lands there's no lasers, cannonballs, or mechanical arm to hurt you. Lilac Cruise doesn't really have any real hazards, however the stage will tilt left and right as it's flying through space. With hazards off, the stage won't tilt at all and stay completely straight. Just like PS1, Pokemon Stadium 2 starts off as a battlefield-like stage and then has random transformations throughout the battle. But with hazards off, there are no transformations whatsoever, so it's the exact same as Pokemon Stadium 1, which is basically the exact same as Battlefield without the top platform. Port Town Aerodive is another one of those traveling stages that takes you across an F-Zero racetrack. There are parts of the track and walls that will actually hurt you if you make contact with them, and the other racers driving by can also hurt you. With hazards off, the stage can still hurt you and it still travels to all its crazy locations, but there are no other racers on the track. Castle Siege is a 3-part transformation stage. However, with hazards off, the stage is set to the very first rooftop section and never transforms. Distant Planet has a lot of things going on. There's a red Bulborb that occasionally appears on the right side that can eat you, there are pellets and pellet posies that spawn that you can get items from, the leaves in the main platform actually move as you stand on them, and occasionally it rains, which causes a downpour on the left side. With hazards off, there's no red Bulborb on the right side, there's no rain and stream on the left side, there's no pellets and pellet posies, and the leaves in the main platform don't move when you stand on them. Smashville has a moving platform that's constantly going left and right, and balloons that occasionally float by carrying items. However, with hazards off, the item-carrying balloons never spawn, and the moving platform stays stationary in the middle. New Pork City has a wooden platform at the bottom that can be destroyed, a ship that's swinging on a pendulum, and the occasional ultimate chimera. With hazards off, of course the ultimate chimera never appears, the ship doesn't actually swing, and the platform at the bottom can't be destroyed. Summit has a lot going on. There's a fish that occasionally appears if you get too close to the water, there's an ice platform that can be destroyed, there's icicles that can fall on you, the left platform will fall if you stand on it for too long, and there's moving cloud platforms that occasionally appear at the top and bottom of the stage. There's also ice block platforms that occasionally float in at the bottom, and the stage will travel and tilt and change your air physics a little as it zooms down the mountain. However, with hazards off, there's no giant fish, the ice platform can't be destroyed, the icicles never fall, the left platform never falls from standing on it, there are no moving cloud platforms at the top and the bottom, and the ice block platforms never appear. The stage still travels and tilts, but when you get into those super fast downhill moments, it doesn't feel like your air physics change. Skyworld has a moving platform underneath the stage, the right side platform is chained to the stage and is constantly moving up and down, and all the platforms can be destroyed. However, with hazards off, you can't destroy any of the platforms, the moving platform underneath never appears, and the right side chain platform doesn't move. Shadow Moses Island has a watchtower on each side that kind of boxes all the fighters in, however you can destroy them, which opens up walk-off blast zones. But with hazards off, you actually can't destroy the watchtowers at all. Luigi's Mansion has moving platforms on the far left and right side that occasionally appear, and of course you can destroy the support pillars, which in turn destroys the mansion. However, with hazards off, the support pillars can't be destroyed, and the moving platforms on the far left and right side never appear. The pirate ship stage features a catapult that can launch characters, enemies in the background that shoot bombs, the King of the Red Lions that appears on the right side as an extra platform, and the ship eventually reaches a rocky island and docks for a little bit. And at the end there's a giant hurricane that also affects your air physics. But with hazards off, the catapult never appears, the enemies don't shoot bombs, the King of the Red Lions never appears on the right side, the ship never gets to its rocky island, and there's no hurricane. However, the ship does still tilt back and forth, and it will still meteor smash you, so be careful. Spear Pillar has platforms on the left and right side that are constantly moving up and down, and legendary Pokemon that occasionally appear in the background and have crazy effects on the battle, like flipping it upside down, inverting controls, etc. So with hazards off, the platforms are set to a middle height and don't move. However, the legendary Pokemon still appear in the background, but it's just for show. They don't have any effect on the battle. The 75M stage features elevator-style platforms, fire enemies that randomly travel around the stage, and a retro DK at the top that releases springs that send you flying. With hazards off, there are no fire enemies crawling around the stage, DK doesn't release any springs, and the elevator platforms are stationary. The Mario Bros. Stage features shell creepers, sidesteppers, POW blocks, and you can bump the floors from below, just like in the original Mario Bros. Game. However, with hazards off, there are no shell creepers, no sidesteppers, no POW blocks, and of course, you can't bump the floors from below. Everyone's favorite stage, Hand and Bow, features leaves as platforms that move and change angles as you hit them, and also creatures that fly across the screen and hit the platforms for you. With hazards off, you actually can't hit the leaves whatsoever because they don't have a hurt box, which means the angles of the platforms that you're fighting on will never change. The little creatures that fly by and hit the platforms also never appear. Green Hill Zone features checkpoints that can damage your enemies, and the middle of the stage can be destroyed. With hazards off, the checkpoints never appear, and of course the stage can't be destroyed. On the 3D Land stage, there are blocks that can be broken, question mark blocks that spawn items when you break them, donut blocks that fall if you stand on them for too long, rocks that come out of the walls and move the platforms during the mountain section, and spiky pillars that hurt you and affect the stage during the last section. But with hazards off, none of the blocks can be broken, the question mark blocks are already broken, the donut blocks do not fall, the rocks don't come out of the walls to move the platforms during the mountain section, and the spiky pillars can't hurt you or affect the stage at all during the last section. Golden Plains is a scrolling stage, but the first area it starts out in has a platform on each side that are constantly moving. There are coins that are constantly appearing, and if you collect 100 coins, I believe you go invincible for a little bit. But with hazards off, the coins never appear, the platforms on the left and right side don't move, and the stage is actually set to this very first area, so it never scrolls. Paper Mario is another one of those transforming stages, however with hazards off, it's set to the first area. So the fan that usually appears and blows wind doesn't actually appear, however the platform still swings and the windmill can still be moved when you stand on it. Gerudo Valley has a bridge in the middle that can be destroyed, and two witches that occasionally appear to screw up the stage with their fire and ice magic. However, with hazards off, the witches never appear and the bridge can't be destroyed. Occasionally on the Spirit Train stage, dark and armored trains can appear on the left and right side, pushing the main platform to the left or to the right. Occasionally, the back car of the train gets filled with coal, making it a little harder to fight on, and there are extra floating platforms that occasionally appear at the top of the stage. However, with hazards off, the stage is set right in the middle. The dark and armored trains never appear, so the train never gets pushed to either side, and the back car doesn't get filled with coal. However, those extra floating, moving platforms at the top will still appear. Dreamland Game Boy is kind of a mix of a scrolling stage and a transforming stage, however, none of that matters because with hazards off, it's the exact same. The Unova Pokemon League is a basic 2-platform stage with the occasional Pokemon cameo in the background. Most of the Pokemon don't actually do anything, however Zekrom and Reshiram will transform the stage and cause other hazards to happen. If you play the stage with hazards off, Zekrom and Reshiram won't appear because they actually affect the stage, however the other Pokemon that are just for show will still appear. Just like Delfino Plaza, there is no change to Prism Tower with hazards off. The stage still travels throughout its normal course with different platform layouts throughout the trip, and it will still take off without you. The Mute City SNES stage features the Blue Falcon as the main platform in the middle, with 2 floating platforms on the sides that are constantly moving. There are also other racers that'll appear on the left and right sides of the Blue Falcon that'll bump it occasionally, and those racers will occasionally get bumped completely off the screen. However, with hazards off, the Blue Falcon is the only machine for the entire race, and the side platforms never move from their original position. 2 things to note though is that the Blue Falcon will still tilt as it turns around the track, and the track can still hurt you. Magicant is one of those stages with a lot going on. There's Dungeon Man walking across the bottom, trees that randomly spawn, mobile sprouts, sky runners, tomatoes, octopus statues, etc. There's also Flying Man, which you can hit to get him on your team. So with hazards off, of course there's no Flying Man, there's no Dungeon Man, there's no trees, there's no mobile sprouts, there's no sky runners, tomatoes, octopus statues, etc. It's just the default cloud platform layout. Similar to Pokemon Stadium, Arena Ferox starts off as like a final destination type stage and then has random transformations throughout the battle. These random transformations feature statues that can be destroyed and hanging platforms that move when hit. However, unlike Pokemon Stadium, if you play Arena Ferox with hazards off, the stage is set to a random variation every single time you play. So instead of experiencing no transformations, you get to experience a different transformation every time you play the stage. However, the hanging platforms don't move when you hit them, and the statues can't be destroyed. Reset Bomb Forest is another one of those transforming stages with all sorts of things you can interact with and get hurt by in the later transformations. However, with hazards off, Reset Bomb Forest is set to the very first basic area. Tortimer Island is one of those stages that has a random layout every single time you play the game. It also has a boat that appears on the right side, and a shark that appears on the left side, and fruit that spawns in the trees that you can eat to heal your percent. With hazards off, the boat and the shark never appear on the sides of the island, and the fruit never appears in the trees. However, the tree layout still randomizes at the start of every game. Balloon Fight also has a random platform layout every single time you start a match. It also features that giant fish that we've seen in the Ice Climber stages, and lightning bolts can spawn out of the clouds. Some platforms also have rocks hanging underneath them that you can break. With hazards off, however, the fish and the lightning bolts never appear, and the rocks under the platforms can't be broken. But the platform layout still randomizes before every single game. Another stage that has a random layout every single time you play is Living Room. Living Room is a big open space, and occasionally blocks and other objects will fall from the sky and act as temporary platforms until they despawn and a new set of objects comes down. However, with hazards off, those blocks and objects will spawn once and never disappear. And the layout of the blocks is going to be random every single time you play. The Find Me stage features a cage that you can stand on as a platform, but you can also hit it to get it to swing back and forth. And if you hit it enough, you'll temporarily destroy it. There's also a platform on the right side that occasionally collapses, and of course the Dark Emperor appears and grants you buffs and nerfs. But with hazards off, there's no Dark Emperor, the platforms never collapse, and the cage doesn't move and you can't destroy it, but you can still stand on it. On the Tomodachi Life stage, there are usually walls that cover up all the rooms, and they're only revealed once you're standing in it. However, with hazards off, every room is visible at all times.
Oh my goodness!
PictoChat 2 starts out as a flat Final Destination type stage, but then random drawings start appearing, and they can be anything from fiery hazards to extra sets of platforms. With hazards off, the drawings will never appear, so the stage is essentially Final Destination with sloped ledges. Mushroom Kingdom U is a transforming stage controlled by Kamek. It features moving platforms, Nabbit, the Beanstalk, stretchy blocks, icicles, geysers, big urchins, and other hazards. However, if you turn hazards off, Kamek never appears to transform the stage, so it's set to the very first area and the moving platforms never appear. Mario Galaxy is a simple curved stage with walk-off blast zones and a platform on each side. I thought perhaps that the curvature of the stage and the unique gravity wouldn't affect projectiles with hazards off, but the truth is, nothing changes about this stage. Mario Circuit is a traveling stage that stops at different areas and has Shy Guys racing by that can hurt you. And there's also certain areas of the track that will hurt you. With hazards off, the stage still travels to all its normal areas, and the track will still hurt you. The only difference is there are no kart racers driving by. Skyloft is another one of those traveling, transforming stages. However, with hazards off, it is set to the very first area. So it's kind of similar to Battlefield, but with really long, angled side platforms. Surprisingly, hazards off on the Great Cave Offensive doesn't really change much. The lava still hurts you and will instantly kill you at 100+%, the spikes still hurt you, and you can still shoot yourself out of the cannons. The only difference is the treasure chests that give items never appear, and the minecarts that carry you from one side of the stage to the other never appear. The Kalos Pokemon League stage is very similar to Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2. It starts off with a platform on each side and then occasionally transforms into different type-themed stages. However, with Hazards Off, the stage has no transformations and is set to the very first area, with a platform overhanging each ledge. Just like Arena Ferox, Coliseum features random transformations throughout the battle that feature all sorts of platform layouts. However, unlike Arena Ferox, with Hazards Off, Coliseum has no transformations and is set to the very first area, so it's basically just a really long final destination with walk-off blast zones. Flat Zone X has all sorts of transformations and hazards that can hurt you. There's people, there's the chef, there's oil spills, there's falling objects, there's firemen with their trampolines, etc. With Hazards Off, there are no transformations and a random platform layout is set at the start of the match and never changes. Palutena's temple normally features spikes, springs, a bridge that can be destroyed, moving platforms, a mini stage in the top left, and a platform on the right side that rises to form another mini stage. However, with Hazards Off, there are no springs, no spikes, not even underneath the stage, the bridge can't be destroyed even though it still has a hurt box, the moving platforms are stationary, the mini stage in the top left is stationary, and the platform on the right side is also stationary, so it never rises up to form another mini stage. Gamer is another one of those stages that features a random layout every single time you play. However, there's also 5 Volt, aka the mom, that'll appear occasionally and scream at you if she sees you. With Hazards Off, the layout is still randomized before the start of each game, but the scary mama never appears. Garden of Hope features a destructible bridge, pots, sticks, Pikmin, the peckish Aristocrab, and platforms on the side that will start falling if you're standing on them. But with Hazards Off, there's no bridge, there's no pots, there's no sticks, there's no Pikmin, there's no peckish Aristocrab, and of course the side lift platforms are stationary. Town and City is a traveling stage that moves between the town and the city, of course, and each section has a different platform layout with moving platforms. And there's also balloons that float by occasionally carrying items. With Hazards Off, the stage will still transition and the platforms will still leave and return, but they stay still during each section of the stage, and the balloons that carry items never appear. The Wii Fit Studio features Wii balance boards as platforms, and the platform layout will actually change throughout the match or completely disappear. With Hazards Off, however, the platform layout is randomly decided before the start of each match, and the platforms will never leave or change layout. However, they do still move when you step on them. The boxing ring features huge stage lights that can be knocked down, and ropes that you can bounce on. With Hazards Off, you can still bounce on the ropes, but you can't knock the stage lights down. Garu Plane features springs at the bottom so you can easily bounce up to the top, and occasionally Metal Face will appear and start attacking you and destroy half the stage. With Hazards Off, there's no springs at the bottom, and of course, Metal Face never appears. On the Duck Hunt stage, there's a little foreground bush that occasionally appears that you can hide behind, and of course there's the whole duck and dog mechanic. If you hit the ducks, the dog will pop up afterwards with them in his hands, and he actually creates his own little platform. However, with Hazards Off, the dog and ducks never appear, so the dog never creates his own little platform, and the foreground bush that you can hide behind also doesn't appear. Wrecking Crew is an interesting stage because the layout is constantly changing as you destroy the floors. But with Hazards Off, the bombs and the barrels never appear, therefore the walls can't be destroyed, and the stage layout can't be changed, so it's randomized every time before the game starts. Pilot Wings starts on a red biplane and then eventually tosses you off onto a yellow plane. However, with Hazards Off, there are no transformations and the stage is set to the very first area, which would just be the red biplane. Unfortunately, you can still be hit by the mountains and the bridges as you're flying by, but the red biplane doesn't tilt back and forth. Woohoo Island goes through all sorts of transformations, but with Hazards Off, the stage doesn't transform at all and is set to the very first area with the one platform and the weird angled ledges. Windy Hill Zone features a giant windmill on the right side that's constantly moving, and springs that occasionally appear at the bottom on the left and right side. But with Hazards Off, the springs never appear and the windmill doesn't move whatsoever. Usually Wily Castle features those moving platforms that are on a track, and the occasional boss battle appearance from the Yellow Devil. When turning Hazards Off, obviously you don't get the Yellow Devil, but you also don't get the moving platforms, so the stage literally just becomes Final Destination. Pac-Land is a crazy scrolling stage that takes you back and forth. It's got fire hydrants that shoot water, water geysers that rise up, logs that fall down, cloud platforms that move, and a springboard. With hazards off, the stage is still scrolling and you still have to follow it. However, the fire hydrants don't shoot water, the water geysers don't rise, the logs don't fall, the cloud platforms don't move, and lastly, the springboard doesn't work. Super Mario Maker obviously has a random layout every single time you play the stage, and it features stuff like fire, ice, lava, moving platforms, falling donut blocks, rotating blocks, conveyor belts, blocks that yield items, etc. So with hazards off, the stage still has a random layout every single time, however things like lava, ice, moving platforms, rotating blocks, etc. never appear. Suzaku Castle is actually one of those rare stages that doesn't have any changes whatsoever with hazards off. You can even still throw people through the sign. Midgar is basically Battlefield, but it also has the summon materia which summon these crazy powerful beings that either change the layout of the stage or affect it with a huge hazard. But if you turn hazards off, and I'm sure you can probably guess this one yourself, it's literally just Battlefield. Umbra Clock Tower looks like it has a lot of crazy hazards going on in the background, but actually none of it can hurt you. The only thing that actually happens is the stone platforms that occasionally float by. But with hazards off, those platforms never actually appear. Hazards off for Umbra Clock Tower is literally just Omega Mode Umbra Clock Tower. And finally, it's time for the Smash Ultimate stages. First, we have New Donk City Hall, which has you traveling up the City Hall building with different sections and different platform layouts. Some of them move, some of them don't, and occasionally as you're traveling up the building, Pauline and the band will visit you on the sides. If you go and attack them, a little animation will play, but I can't figure out if they actually do anything. I'm pretty sure they're just there for show. If you turn hazards off, the stage will still travel up the building, however there are two sections that usually have moving platforms that no longer move. And Pauline and the band don't actually appear as you're going up the building with hazards off, which makes me feel like they actually do something with hazards on. So if you know anything about that, let me know in the comments. The top of the Great Plateau Tower can be destroyed, which will temporarily create a new platform, but eventually it'll rebuild itself. With hazards off, you can't destroy that top part whatsoever, so feel free to play ping pong as much as you like. Moray Towers is another one of those rare stages that actually has no changes with hazards off. And finally, Dracula's Castle. This stage features platforms that are constantly moving, and occasionally candles will appear that will give you items if you break them. There's also a ton of characters that appear in the background, but from what I've experienced, they're all just for show. With hazards off, however, the candles that give you items never appear, all the characters still appear in the background since they're just for show, and the platforms never move. And that's every single stage in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate with hazards on versus hazards off. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more of these, please leave a thumbs up and share this video on your favorite social network. The research, the writing, and getting short clips of every single stage took me about 10 hours over 3 days. And editing everything together afterwards probably took me another 4 or 5 hours. So with this video, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a like and shared it. Also, there's a Smash wiki page that has a list of all the stages and what happens with hazards off. As it turns out, a lot of the stages are actually missing from that list, and some of the entries aren't even correct. So I'm gonna post all my research as a Google Doc in the video description below, and if anyone wants to fill out and correct that wiki page, you're more than welcome to do so. But that's it for me. Click on screen for more of my Smash Ultimate content. Thanks for watching all the way until the very end, and as always, happy smashing.